Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Thursday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing well out there, safe and okay. I haven't heard of any deaths in Florida yet, but I can tell you the footage that I was seeing got much worse as the sun went down yesterday. It seems like the first half of the day yesterday, it wasn't too bad, but it's pretty evident that the western eye wall, basically the back side of Ian, was much worse than the front side of Ian. It was your classic scenario where the second half of the storm is worse than the first half. So this wreaked havoc across the peninsula of Florida overnight. It's still affecting Florida and hitting you guys hard. I saw some crazy footage waking up this morning. I wake up really early, and I can tell you some of the footage, I was like, wow. This escalated much quickly, and it certainly looked like a Category 4 or 5 hurricane. So hopefully you guys are okay down there. You're recovering. But I have a feeling as the sun comes up on Florida this morning throughout the afternoon that is going to shine light on a lot of devastation. So we got some things to talk about, though, because we're not done with Ian. Ian is emerging off the coast of Florida now, the eastern side. It is moving a little quicker than I think we thought. The models are starting to catch up. We're going to talk about that. But it's already starting to get off the eastern coast of Florida. And I think it's going to intensify, guys. And I really think it's going to re-strengthen into a hurricane and hit South Carolina. It's a 65-mile-per-hour storm right now. So let's get into this. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly do that. If you like the video, if you like it, I appreciate the support. Hit me up on Twitter, guys. I'm telling you, especially if you live in the Carolinas. I'm from the Carolinas. This is where I live, homegrown. And I'm constantly keeping you guys updated. It's a great way to follow along Twitter and Facebook, but especially Twitter. And if you guys got anything that I can pray about and pray over, please put it in the comments below. We're certainly praying over Florida this morning. Let's take a look at radar scope. Let's take a look at this first. So this is what's left over of Ian. It still has a nice spin to it, but as you can tell, and as we've been talking about, the northwest flank of this storm is the worst. So from Daytona Beach down to Edgewater, basically the Space Coast right here in this area, getting slammed by what's left of the intact wall of eye wall, basically. This is the center of circulation right here. It's entering off the coast of Florida now. So once it kind of situates itself over water, this is going to start to re-strengthen. South Carolina up here, you see Savannah, center of circulation right here. This is going to start to drift over water. How far east does it get over water into these areas? This could intensify, guys. Models have done nothing but trended more and more east. In fact, instead of it making landfall around Savannah, which is what a lot of models have been showing, I'm thinking it's going to be close to Charleston, maybe somewhere between Charleston and Myrtle Beach. So that's just going to give it more time to strengthen. So this is a big deal, guys. It really is, because I'm really starting to think this is going to make landfall as an all-out hurricane for the South Carolina coastline. Right now, still a tropical storm per the National Hurricane Center. But you look at this wind field. You see this orange area? That is the expansion of tropical storm force winds, which is 39 miles per hour or higher. So it doesn't have a small wind field anymore. It's kind of broadened. And I expect tropical storm force winds to be felt along the southern coastlines of South Carolina and certainly the coastlines of Georgia. As early as right now to later in the morning for a little bit further north. You got tropical storm warnings up all the way to the southern flank of the Outer Banks. Hurricane watch is still up. But listen, I think hurricane warnings will be issued for certainly areas of the South Carolina coastline. I do. I think this is going to remain a tropical storm even further inland. And I mean, it's speeding up in time. I think this can make landfall as early as noon tomorrow. Let's take a look at Zoom. What I want to show you here is the center of circulation is probably in this area right here. Forecast to still be a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm, 2 p.m. this afternoon. Still 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm overnight tonight, but watch how it goes from 65 to 70. Now the National Hurricane Center, per the 5 a.m. update, it's saying, hey, this is likely going to strengthen somewhat. But I'm making this video at 6:39 Eastern Time. Next update's at 8 a.m. or somewhere in between. I would not be surprised if the next cone of uncertainty, if not at 8 a.m., then maybe 11 a.m., they say that they put the big old H right here and say that this is likely going to strengthen back into at least a Category 1 hurricane. I don't think it's going to make it to a Category 2 hurricane, but I'm not saying never. I'm saying never say never in this case. We have doubted this area of the ocean and the Gulf of Mexico many a times, and it's surprised us. So I'm going to be out storm chasing. I'm going to probably head to the coast. I'm probably going to intercept the landfall, so I'll have you guys some content down there. I'm really glad I stayed home now, just because I can talk about my own home state. This is where I started here in South Carolina. But listen, I mean, this has a chance to make direct landfall in Charleston. I think flooding is going to be a big story in these areas. So this is going to make landfall probably sometime tomorrow afternoon and probably remain a tropical storm for at least a period of time through South Carolina. So here you go. We're looking at watches and warnings. Tropical storm watches up almost all the way up to Charlotte, North Carolina. It goes through Columbia, South Carolina, Augusta. You got tropical storm warnings up for Charleston, Savannah, the entire Georgia coastline, the entire South Carolina coastline, up through Wilmington. Tropical storm watches up even in areas of eastern Georgia. But I have a feeling this is going to get extended into North Carolina a little bit later today, if not in the next couple updates by the time you watch this video. Let's talk about some model information. So, latest GFS, Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. Look how far off the coast the GFS has it now. Before it even turns north, it wants it to almost go east-northeast. And then it gets off the coast, then it starts to jolt north, dives and back into a 979 millibar low pressure storm. I would argue this is a hurricane Friday morning. Maybe weakens a little bit, but it's going to be hard to say it's going to weaken. But it could, due to a lot of shear and dry air from the stalled frontal boundary up here. But then could strengthen again, make landfall as early as lunchtime to tomorrow afternoon. The GFS wants it to hit right over Charleston. So this is a big deal. This is going to push a lot of water on the coastal areas, bring a lot of heavy rain, gusty winds well inland. So a 980 millibar low pressure, if you're confused at what that means, think of that as probably a Category 1 hurricane. Once you start to get into maybe the 990s range, I would say that could be a hurricane. Millibars don't always indicate how strong a storm is. And when you're comparing it to actual miles per hour, as far as the actual reading of the tropical system, but I think a 980 certainly is a Category 1 hurricane, definitely. And almost all model guidance now has this making landfall as at least a Category 1 hurricane into South Carolina. This plows through, brings a lot of heavy rain for the Carolinas, but for Virginia also, the Delmarva area, the further this inches north up the coastline, the more rainfall falls further north. Washington, D.C., a lot of heavy rain. Maryland, Delmarva, Virginia, I think southeast Virginia, and northeast North Carolina will be a hard-hit area. Look at the European. The European gets off the coast. It's basically already off the coast, guys. And starts to jog it north, but gets well off the coast of the southeast in Florida. And Friday morning, has a 982 millibar low pressure, drops to a 978 sometime Friday morning, and makes landfall between Savannah and Charleston. The European still aiming towards more of a southerly landfall. This would cause probably more impacts for more of South Carolina. The more it inches north, say if it made landfall in Myrtle Beach, the center of circulation, then I think there will be a sharp cutoff rainfall total gradient here. That means you might go from a couple inches of rain in Atlanta to hardly nothing. And same thing with Columbia. If this makes landfall, for example, maybe you're up around Myrtle Beach, you could go from forecast to get 4 to 5 inches of rain to maybe an inch or two. There's a tight rainfall gradient right here. I want to mention that. I do, because if you're somewhere like in Augusta to Columbia and you're expecting several inches of rain and you only get an inch or two, that is the reason. Massive cutoff. All this moisture is northern and front loaded and northeast loaded and easternly loaded. So there's a tight rainfall gradient due to a ton of dry air and shear right up here. So if the Euro happens, brings a lot of rainfall for even areas of eastern Georgia, South Carolina, the Carolinas, Virginia, and this makes landfall sometime tomorrow afternoon as a hurricane. This would be a Category 1 hurricane. That's why I think hurricane warnings will be issued along the coastal lines as early as sometime between now and the next hour or two. I would not be surprised, but if not then, sometime today. Latest 06Z guidance, most have it plowing right into South Carolina. And then you see how the lines get kind of squiggly. That's because the steering currents weaken. And basically the center of low pressure, wherever it's left, whatever it's left over of it, just dwindles around. It doesn't know what to do. Gets kind of lost in the flow of things, if you will. But I'm showing you the possible intensity. You notice that some of these lines, they jolt up. Some of them make it to a category 1, only 2 of them do. But it shows you the idea that this is going to have a brief period of re-intensifying. I really do think it is. And like I said, this wind field is huge, guys. And I mean, all this is going to do is continue to extend north. If you're in South Carolina, North Carolina, you'll notice the winds. You walk outside and head to work, you'll notice it's breezy. But you'll notice they really pick up tonight. They really do. In southeast Georgia also. This is a pretty big and broadened wind field. Rainfall totals. I'm not rainfall totals, but the flash flood risk, you got a 40% chance of flash flood guidance being met in these areas right here in the red. That's a 40% chance. Includes Charlotte to Asheville, Columbia, almost to Augusta. Not quite. This is likely going to get extended a little bit further north. Storm surge, 3 to 5 feet from Savannah to Charleston, 2 to 4 feet from Myrtle Beach. And then, of course, you're dealing with storm surge right now in and around the Jacksonville area. Storm surge possible all the way up to Cape Lookout. This is going to be a problem, and I think it could become more of a problem. I think this will likely increase probably in the next hour or two. I have a feeling that it will. We'll see. Potential wind gust here. We'll start this off overnight tonight. You'll notice the winds are already howling down here in the coastal regions of Georgia and South Carolina especially. But as we're getting into tomorrow morning, you start to get into full-on consistent tropical storm force winds along the coast. And this begins to move inland. I mean, look up here in Columbia and Augusta, winds gusting, not sustained, to 30 to 40 miles per hour. That means you'll get brief gusts of those kind of wind speeds. But look at the center of the storm. It's starting to move in an inch closer. We're getting into Friday morning, late Friday morning around noon, into the early afternoon, makes landfall. But look at this winds. And this is just the Euro. The GFS is a little bit further north. I'll show you that here in a second. But look at these winds into the southern Midlands of South Carolina, areas of eastern Georgia, gusting to 50, 60 miles per hour. And then you got what kind of core does this have around the center of circulation? That's a big question. As this makes landfall in the low country of South Carolina. This spins like this, right? So if this happens, this would sling a ton of water into the bays of Charleston and cause a lot of issues as far as flooding and freshwater flooding, but saltwater flooding also. But this will move inland, bring intense wind speeds well inland. But of course, along the coastal areas, all Friday p.m. tomorrow, winds gusting to hurricane force winds are certainly almost likely at this point. But I mean, look all the way up to Charlotte. Winds gusting 40, 50 miles per hour, and even some wind speeds picking up in Raleigh, into Virginia. And then this moves on through, and there's probably going to be a period of gusty winds all the way up into Virginia. This is going to interact with the jet and really surge this, and I think promote strengthening off the coastline of Georgia and South Carolina. Here's the GFS. You'll notice winds pick up tonight. I mean, this is tonight. Winds gusting to potentially 30, 40 miles per hour in eastern South Carolina and eastern Georgia, even into southeast North Carolina. We'll keep on going forward here. Notice the GFS a little bit further up the coastline. Makes landfall in and around the Charleston area. But look at this area of 60, 70 mile per hour winds. I mean, close to Sumter, Manning, South Carolina. The only reason I know these towns in South Carolina is because I live here. But early tomorrow afternoon, I mean, you got intense wind speeds all the way into Columbia, 50, 60 mile per hour wind gust, not sustained gust. But this would bring a nasty wind core into Myrtle Beach, pushing hurricane force winds. But look at this little area into the PD to upstate of South Carolina, moving into the Piedmont of North Carolina. I'm telling you, it's gonna be hard. We got to figure out where this is gonna make landfall. And that's really just watching real-time observations today and see how these models tick back and forth. But there's going to be some strong wind gusts. I put this on Twitter, and I had a lot of people say blah blah blah. You always hype these things up, but it's never that big of a deal. But I really think for South Carolina, speaking, this could be the biggest tropical system in, I would say, 3 or 4 years. I really think that's the case. I know we had ECIS in 2020, but that kind of more so just scraped the far eastern, northeastern areas of the state. We had Irma in 2019. We had Michael in 2018. But this is going to be a direct impact along the coastal areas. So big deal. Latest national blend of models. Like I said, tight rainfall gradient. I would not be surprised if this ticks a little bit further east as far as the heaviest rainfall. So just be watching. If you're in Augusta, Columbia, you might see your rainfall totals drop somewhat, but we'll see. We'll see. But it's increasing in eastern North Carolina, eastern South Carolina, and southeast Virginia, where I think anywhere in these areas could see 5 to as much as 10 inches of rain. And then there's going to be an amplified area of rain in the southern Appalachian Mountains just due to higher elevations, which help to amplify rain in these areas. So I think that this is going to be a weather story in this area that isn't getting talked about much right now, but will become a bigger story. Rainfall even all up to West Virginia, Virginia, and even southeast areas of Kentucky is certainly possible. But one thing I want to mention here really is the incredible gradient of air masses. You got a tropical air mass over Florida and an incredibly fall type air mass. I would argue that this is an air mass you see in late November for the southeast, early December. Dew points right now out there in the 30s to 40s. Yesterday in South Carolina, for example, especially the Midlands, I mean, it was there was some high clouds, but the high clouds wasn't stopping it from it being a sunny day. And it was a nip in the air. Even in the middle of the afternoon, it was only 72, 73 degrees, but the humidity was incredibly low. Dew points only in the 40s, and there was a crisp feel to the air. That will still be there today. Basically, you just got two competing air masses. And what's wild today is Ian will help push this dry air all the way into Florida. This will provide relief for people recovering in Florida. This will push dry air briefly into Florida overnight tonight. Dew points in the 50s, maybe all the way into southern areas of Florida. So this will be nice for recovery efforts. But I can tell you the air mass will be replaced today by tropical air mass briefly tomorrow. But it's still really the only real true tropical air mass that gets pushed in is probably in eastern South Carolinas, where basically on the east side of the storm, it's just more of a moist environment. But as soon as this tropical system moves through, more fall air ushers in. So with the cloud cover today, I think highs in the southeast, guys. Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina will be jammed up in the 60s. I wouldn't be surprised if certain areas do not get out the 50s. Incredibly, it's going to just feel like straight up fall out there today with a breeze, cooler temperatures. It's going to be an unreal atmosphere out there ahead of the storm. Stay safe, guys.